I had a much better life in books and movies and music than I could ever have in my real life.
How do you define story?
I would say that story is what happens. Because to me that comes to the question of story and plot. And I think of it as story is what is happening in the lives of the people in the story, in the characters. You know, in other words, whatever's actually happening to them, which happens in the order that it happens chronologically in their lives, it's what happens. Whereas plot is how we tell that story. That to me they're very different, because you can tell things in many, many different ways. You can tell the same story in many, many different ways. So the story, though, remains like whatever happened. Like Hamlet's father died. Whether or not Hamlet's father was or was not poisoned, different versions, different plots of the same story. Whether or not the ghost is going to talk to Hamlet, or Hamlet's just going to be personally pissed off and angry, after or those things. But the death and the eventual catastrophic climax of his anger about that's what happened. Whether you decide to, it's possible to tell that story of Hamlet from the parents' point of view, from the and like, this kid is out of control. What are we going to do with him? He's going crazy. And well, let's let him put on his play or whatever. Like there's a whole version of that, which is, and actually this is so dumb because Tom Stoppard wrote that. Tom Stoppard wrote Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is a brilliant play about two very minor characters in Hamlet and about their experience of the story of Hamlet when they're just dragged into it for a couple of scenes and then, spoiler alert, they're killed. So they're headed towards their death for reasons they don't understand, and that's their story through the events. And Tom Stoppard decided, hey, what if I look at that and tell Hamlet that way? And what was revealed in that was how we are all dragged into things and headed towards our death without any knowledge of why. And that's why it's such a fabulous, profound play. I urge everyone to read it. But anyway, the point is, for me, story is the events. It's the things that happen to the people. Then plot is how we tell that story, which events of their lives. Lots of things are, they stopped and had lunch. during Hamlet, they stopped and had lunch and they took a shower. And we cut that out of our plot, of our version of the story. So to me, it's important to remember that the story is there. People talk about story in the industry as essentially the plot. It's my definition of the plot. Story is the way you are telling this movie's story. But what I think is that there's a story, there's things that happened, and then there's how you tell it. And to me, it's good to remember that both of those things exist. The story may only exist as you make it up, but once you've got it, it's there, and then you can decide, I'm going to skip this part, or I'm going to do this part as a flashback, or whatever it is. That's not actually changing the story. It's not actually changing the character's experience. And I think it's very valuable to respect the character's experience and then think of yourself as the storyteller, the person who's putting that set of events and characters into a work of art, which is by necessity, because all art is limited, going to leave out a lot and interpret a lot.
How much of your view of story has changed over the years?
I think I simply didn't define it for myself. I just operated on it without thinking until I started teaching. Having finished my career and decided to do some teaching, and I had to put this into words, I had to figure out these things I'm saying now. Often I was not aware of them while I was doing them. I just looked at it that way. So I don't think my sense, I mean, there was probably a while there where I was just parroting whatever I had read or heard about how to tell a story. But I think there's a natural vibe, there's a natural way that we work, and it's different for everybody. And my natural way to work was to sort of feel like the things that were happening in a story were real. that when I watched a movie, it was kind of real, and then the movie was just like this overlay over it. And honestly, my memory of this is, and it may not be correct, but in the romanticized version, my initial instinct was simply to want to be in the art, want to be in the story. I wanted, I started reading like with the Hardy Boys, and I just wanted to be in the Hardy Boys. I wanted to be a Hardy Boy, or I wanted to, like, it didn't occur to me that there was this extra layer of art over that. It was just this thing that you could open a book and go into, and it was alive to me. At a certain point, I recognized that I was never going to be a Hardy Boy. It actually was, I may have mentioned this before.
I think you did, but I love
this. Yeah. I was a big James Bond fan from the movies initially, and then I tried reading the books. But James Bond was just really a big deal to me in the 1960s when I was 10 years old. And I stumbled across an article by Ian Fleming, who wrote James Bond, and he wrote an article about how he wrote James Bond. And it was very debonair and funny. It was a great article, and I read that, it blew my mind. I was like, okay, I can't be James Bond, but I could be Ian Fleming. I could be the guy who makes up James Bond and works out how you tell that story. And that was the switch for me. And from then on, that's all I wanted to do.
I love that. I love that you said you wanted to be in the art, because that crystallizes things for me as well. Because I think of all the movies that I love, and I want to be in them. I want to be one of the characters too. I want to live in that world.
I kind of feel like I was. I have to tell you, I often will, I have a lot of books, and I will never get to reread them. And a lot of them, I look at them and I say, I don't remember what happened in that book, but I keep it on my shelf, partly because it reminds me of when I read it, but also when I look at them, the ones that I do remember, even if it's just a scene or something, it's almost like a thing that happened to me. It's almost like my memories are all these travels, are all these adventures, are all these experiences. I had a much better life in books and movies and music than I could ever have in my real life. I love that I've devoted so much of my real life to that fantasy life, because to me, that's, as I look back on it, I'm like, that was so great when I was in 19th century Russia with the Golovlev family. and that's good enough. That's, memories are memories. Whether or not they're yours or borrowed, they're still your memories, and they still evoke those feelings. So yeah, I kind of think you do live in art when it's working for you. And that's legit. I don't think that that's fake.
And do you think that's what separates people who talk about wanting to do it from those who actually go and do it, whether it's writing, filmmaking, whatever art they're pursuing? Because it's so difficult, it's because you're obsessed with wanting to live in that world?
No, actually, I think that the dividing line is between the people who just don't feel that at all. And I know that there are plenty of people, they probably won't be watching this, but there's plenty of people out there who could take it or leave it as far as art goes. As far as books and movies and stories and paintings and music, everything. It's like, yeah, that's fine. It decorates my life, but they are not in there. And that, I think those people will never, and cool. I mean, I don't think they should. It's just how you're built. But anyone who has that connection, it's perfectly fine to have that connection simply as a fan, as a consumer, as a lover of the art, and never want to write it at all. What's more, not everyone has the gifts or the particular twisted brain operations that make you able to make that stuff work, even though you love it. And it's okay. You do not have to be an artist, and you do not have to be a professional artist if you are an artist. There is absolutely no requirement, and honestly, it's not that much better. except for the pay, and that's frankly changing now and getting harder to make. So therefore, the idea that somehow professional art gives you something extra, it's nice, but you can do just as well doing fan fiction or whatever it is that you're gonna gonna do and never show anybody. That's all the same good thing. And the thing that makes you an artist is an extra layer of bizarre, twisted self in which you feel it, you feel you want to do it, and when you do it, it kind of works. Even though it will never work as well as you think, and so many people get prevented from doing it because it takes a long time and a lot of practice to where it comes out the way you want. And a lot of people give up there, and I would say don't. Don't give up, keep doing it. The more you do it, the more you're likely to have that magical ability. But you should look inside. If you feel like you want to just live in the art world, live in the art world. Just read it a lot, talk to other fans, have fun, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to make it, that's a separate layer. And that requires a whole lot of experience and practice and experimenting and failing and discovering. And so I guess I've sort of created now a three worlds. The world of people who don't care about art, or it's just whatever. The people who love art but don't really want to do it or can't do it. And the people who love art and want to do it. And I have to say, we were talking before about regrets. One of the things I deeply regret is because I was in that want to do it phase, much of my life, until I was in, I guess, my 40s or 50s, I had a certain contempt for the people who didn't care about art. I thought they were essentially not real people. You weren't a real person if you didn't love art. And it took me a while to recognize that there's a perfectly good life with no art in it, or just art as decoration. And that's cool. And frankly, a lot of people who, if you're a doctor, it is very likely that you don't have a lot of time to spend on art. You may have a little downtime and watch something or read something, but you got other stuff to do. And that's good. Thank God the world has that. If the world was only populated by artists, we would be in big trouble. So that's sort of how I see it, is that there's sort of a spectrum of experience with art, which can go from very, very minimal to way too much. And it's not like one is better than the other. It's just figuring out what your natural abilities or connection is and loving it.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.